The story of the iPhone begins long before Steve Jobs ever walked on stage in January 2007. By the time the world saw that glass and aluminum rectangle for the first time, Apple had already spent years quietly reshaping the very idea of what a computer should be. And yet, despite all of Apple's success with the iPod, the Mac, and iTunes, almost no one suspected that the company was about to release a device that would permanently change how billions of people live, communicate, work, and think. What makes the iPhone story so compelling is not just the device itself, but the long chain of events and decisions that led to its creation, many of which were the result of rivalry, risk, and innovation that nearly pushed Apple beyond its limits. To understand the iPhone, you have to understand the world before it. In the early 2000s, phones were nothing like the smartphones we have today. The most influential device at the time was the BlackBerry. It dominated corporate communication with its physical keyboard and secure email system. Other phones, like the Palm Trio and various Windows mobile handsets, tried to merge phones with computer-style features, but they were clunky, slow, and built around tiny styluses and resistive touchscreens. Phones weren't designed for browsing the web the way people used it on computers. Carriers controlled what features were allowed. Manufacturers added buttons instead of removing them. And every phone lived inside a fragmented, confusing ecosystem. No one had solved the problem of making a truly intuitive mobile computer. Meanwhile, Apple had transformed itself from a struggling company in the 1990s to one of the most exciting technology brands in the world. The iPod was a global phenomenon and iTunes had become a digital powerhouse, but Steve Jobs knew something critical. If phones began to play music well, the iPod could be replaced. Apple had to either disrupt the future or watch someone else do it. Inside Apple, the conversation shifted from how do we protect the iPod to how do we reinvent the phone. In 2004, Apple started what would secretly become the iPhone project. Internally, there were two competing ideas. One idea was to create a phone version of the iPod. It would use the iPod's famous click wheel to navigate contacts and even type text messages, a concept that seems unthinkable now, but was seriously explored. The other idea was far more ambitious. It involved transforming Apple's multi-touch research into a full phone interface. Apple had been experimenting with multi-touch technology since the early 2000s, originally for a tablet that Steve Jobs felt wasn't ready yet. The touch interface was smooth, accurate, and allowed gestures like pinch to zoom, which no phone in existence had ever used. Jobs realized that this technology might be the exact breakthrough needed to build a revolutionary phone. Once Apple committed to the multi-touch approach, development accelerated, but it was anything but simple. The project, known internally as Project Purple, was hidden behind extreme secrecy. Engineers were split into isolated groups so that very few people had the full picture. Prototypes constantly broke, the screen shattered easily, battery life was terrible, and integrating phone features with a full desktop-class operating system was nearly impossible. Apple's leadership made a critical decision that changed everything. Instead of using the stripped-down iPod OS or licensing third-party software, Apple chose to build the iPhone on a modified version of Mac OS X. This choice meant the phone could do things no other phone could dream of, but it also meant engineers had to shrink an entire computer operating system into something that fit in your pocket. At the same time, Steve Jobs began negotiations with Singular, which later became AT&T. This partnership was unusual because Apple wanted control over the device experience, something carriers were not used to giving up. After months of negotiations, AT&T agreed to Apple's terms, giving the company unprecedented freedom to build the phone exactly the way it wanted. That single agreement cleared the biggest obstacle that had killed other advanced phone ideas before the iPhone. In January 2007, Apple was ready. At the Macworld conference in San Francisco, Steve Jobs walked on stage, paused, and delivered one of the most famous introductions in technology history. He said Apple would unveil three products: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet device. After repeating this several times, he revealed they were all the same device. The iPhone instantly became a cultural moment, but it wasn't just the announcement that made history, it was the features. No stylus, no physical keyboard, a full desktop-class web browser, visual voicemail, a multi-touch display that responded to gestures like pinch and swipe, and perhaps most importantly, a simple and clean interface that anyone could use. Still, the first iPhone wasn't perfect. It lacked 3G. It didn't have an app store. It didn't support true third party apps. And it was expensive. But none of that mattered because the iPhone wasn't designed to compete with phones as they existed in 2007. It was designed to redefine what a phone could be. Within months, developers were already pushing Apple to open the phone to apps. Users were lining up outside Apple stores, and competitors like Nokia, Palm, and Microsoft suddenly realized their entire phone strategy was in danger. The momentum increased quickly. In 2008, Apple released the iPhone 3G, and with it came one of the most important features in the history of technology, the App Store. This single edition transformed the iPhone from a powerful device into a full platform that developers could build on. Within its first weekend, the App Store had over 10 million downloads. Games, utilities, navigation tools, social media apps, and entire new industries began emerging overnight. Apple no longer simply sold hardware. It now controlled the ecosystem that defined mobile computing. What made the App Store so groundbreaking was how Apple handled installation, payments, and security. Everything flowed through one system that protected users and simplified the entire process. By this point, Apple had established a pattern that would define the iPhone's evolution. Every year, the device would improve in speed, capability, and design. The iPhone 3GS brought faster performance and video recording. The iPhone 4 introduced the Retina display and a new glass and steel design. And behind the scenes, Apple was developing its own chips, beginning with the A4 processor, ensuring the iPhone would never again rely on outside companies for its most essential hardware. This transition became one of Apple's greatest advantages in the years that followed. As Apple moved into the early 2010s, the iPhone was no longer just a successful product. It had become the center of Apple's identity and the foundation of an expanding digital ecosystem. Each new release built on the momentum of the previous one, and many of the features introduced during this period permanently reshaped the smartphone landscape. In 2011, Apple released the iPhone 4S, featuring Siri, the first widely used voice assistant built into a smartphone. Siri wasn't simply a gimmick. It represented Apple's early steps into natural language processing and signaled that artificial intelligence would play a major role in the future of mobile technology. Tragically, just one day after the iPhone 4S was announced, Steve Jobs passed away. His death marked the end of an era, but Apple's vision for the iPhone continued under Tim Cook's leadership. The company was now focused on expanding the phone's capabilities while refining the design that had made it so iconic. The next major step came with the iPhone 5 in 2012. It introduced a taller 4-inch display, a lighter aluminum body, and Apple's new Lightning connector, replacing the older 30-pin dock connector. The iPhone 5 set the tone for a new generation of devices, emphasizing thinness, durability, speed, and advanced camera systems. In the years that followed, the iPhone grew rapidly in both size and power. The iPhone 6 and 6 Plus launched in 2014 and marked Apple's entry into the large screen market, which had previously been dominated by Samsung's Galaxy line. These models were immediate global hits, becoming some of the best-selling smartphones of all time. They also introduced Apple Pay, which allowed users to make secure payments using NFC technology and became a foundational part of Apple's expanding ecosystem. While the iPhone 6 generation experienced its own challenges, including the widely discussed bending issue, its impact on the smartphone market was undeniable. It pushed Apple to adopt larger screens permanently and opened the door for future design philosophies. As the iPhone continued evolving, Apple shifted focus toward improving security and performance at a hardware level. The introduction of Touch ID on the iPhone 5S in 2013 proved how quickly biometric security could become mainstream. By 2015, the iPhone 6S brought 3D Touch, a pressure-sensitive screen technology, along with stronger materials to address durability concerns. Apple continued refining cameras, adding optical image stabilization and more advanced sensors. These upgrades helped turn the iPhone into one of the world's most popular photography tools, often replacing dedicated cameras for millions of people. Apple reached another major turning point in 2016 with the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus. These models removed the traditional headphone jack, a move that sparked controversy but positioned Apple toward a wireless future. They also introduced a dual camera system on the 7 Plus, enabling optical zoom and the early version of portrait mode. That same year, Apple introduced the first generation of AirPods, transforming wireless audio into a mainstream standard and further integrating the iPhone into Apple's expanding ecosystem of devices. But the most dramatic shift arrived in 2017. To mark the 10th anniversary of the iPhone, Apple released two models, the iPhone 8 and the groundbreaking iPhone X. The iPhone X changed nearly everything about how the device looked and worked. It replaced the home button with gesture-based navigation and introduced Face ID, a sophisticated facial recognition system using infrared sensors and a dot projection array. This technology was years ahead of its competitors and set a new standard for smartphone security. The edge-to-edge OLED display, wireless charging, and stainless steel frame pushed the iPhone into a new era of premium design. From this point forward, Apple refined the all-screen design philosophy. The iPhone XS, XR, and 11 series expanded features like battery life, water resistance, and computational photography. In 2019, the iPhone 11 Pro introduced a triple camera system and night mode, proving Apple's commitment to dominating mobile photography. Meanwhile, performance continued to accelerate with new A-series chips that consistently outpaced every competitor on the market. Another major milestone arrived in 2020 with the iPhone 12 lineup. It introduced 5G support, a new flat-edge design reminiscent of the iPhone 4 era, and the return of MagSafe, reimagined as a magnetic accessory system for chargers, wallets, and mounts. MagSafe revitalized how accessories interacted with the phone and allowed Apple to create an entirely new category of products. The iPhone 13 and 14 generations continued improving battery life, camera stability, and emergency features. Apple introduced functions like emergency SOS via satellite, giving users the ability to contact help even without cellular service, a capability that proved life-saving in real emergencies. By the time Apple released the iPhone 15 family in 2023, the device had undergone a major transition in its charging system. Apple shifted from the Lightning port to USB-C, aligning the iPhone with the universal standard used across laptops, tablets, and accessories. This change simplified charging for users worldwide and reflected growing regulatory pressure in Europe. The iPhone 15 Pro also introduced a titanium frame and the powerful A17 Pro chip, enabling console-level gaming, advanced camera processing, and significantly improved efficiency. Throughout each generation, the influence of the iPhone expanded far beyond hardware. The device reshaped entire industries, including photography, banking, app development, social media, video streaming, gaming, navigation, shopping, and communication. It created new companies, destroyed old ones, and redefined what everyday life looks like. The touchscreen interface that once seemed futuristic is now completely normal for billions of people. Concepts like mobile apps, mobile wallets, video calls, cloud storage, and portable high-quality cameras are now expected parts of daily life because the iPhone made them mainstream. The iPhone's history is ultimately a story about transformation. What began as a risky project hidden inside Apple's secret labs became one of the most influential consumer products ever created. Each generation introduced features that pushed technology forward, and each improvement shaped the expectations of both users and competitors. The device that Steve Jobs introduced in 2007 is now almost unrecognizable compared to the modern iPhone, yet the core vision remains unchanged. It was designed to place the power of a computer, a camera, a music player, and a communication device into one simple form that anyone could use. The iPhone didn't just change the phone market, it changed the world. It transformed how we interact with information, how we share our lives, how we capture memories, and how we connect with each other. From the early struggles of Project Purple to the advanced phones we have today, the iPhone has been a continuous march of innovation driven by a single idea: to make technology more personal, more powerful, and more accessible. And with each passing year, the legacy of the iPhone continues to grow as Apple moves deeper into the future of mobile computing. Thank you for watching this story. If you enjoyed learning something new today, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment telling us what you thought of this story.